Our last video, we looked at Mr. McMaurin and we looked at his home. And in this video, we want to look at his children and their legacy. McMaurin had 3 children. The oldest was a young man by the name of David. He was a graduate of the University of Michigan and became a business associate with his father, and later became known as the godfather of the chicory industry. Most of you are familiar, and we touched on it briefly in our last video, of the Chicory Company by the name of E.B. Moeller and Company, which Congressman Henry McMaurin helped launch in 1902. But there was also another chicory plant that was down in Port Huron, down near the corner of Court Street and 3rd Street. And this was a company by the name of H. Frank, a German company. Mike Connell wrote a wonderful article on the chicory industry in Port Huron, where he says this: "It was the congressman's eldest son, David McMaurin, who emerged as a patriarch of the chicory trade. Seldom in American history has one man controlled a commodity so completely." There's a lot to this story, and if you ever get the chance to read Mike's article, it's certainly worthwhile. But let me see if I can give you the highlights. By the way, this photograph you've been looking at is taken at the Frank factory that was down on 3rd Street. This would have been after McMaurin bought out the Frank factory. Frank was Moeller's biggest competitor. But because of the war, the Frank Company, which was German, was put up for auction and was bought by the McMaurins. And that was after the federal government used its wartime powers to seize the American assets of a German company here in the States. Now the McMaurin family owned both of the chicory companies and pretty well monopolized the chicory industry in the United States. This created a tricky, delicate balancing act. Between them, the 2 Port Huron companies controlled at least 90% of the American market for powdered chicory. By law, they were competitors. Collusion would have given them a monopoly, and that was strictly forbidden. David McMaurin took control of Frank, but first he resigned from the Moeller board and sold his Moeller stock to his father, his lawyer, and a personal friend. David's son, who was named after his grandfather, the congressman, H. Gordon McMaurin, and he went by the name of Gordon. He went to Princeton, and when he left in 1927, he had a master's degree in architecture. But rather than pursue a career as an architect, Gordon returned to Port Huron, moved in with his parents, and took over day-to-day operations at E.B. Moeller. And so we had father and son running the 2 chicories in Port Huron and 90% of the chicory business in the United States. As Mike Connell said in his article, the 2 chief executives, father and son, lived under the same roof and sat down for dinner together every evening at the family table. It's difficult to imagine them never discussing business. The Federal Trade Commission found it difficult too. In September of 1937, federal regulators charged Moeller and Frank with violating the Clayton Antitrust Act. After several hearings, the FTC ruled against McMaurin's and issued a cease and desist order. While the legal battle was lost, the business war would be won. The McMaurins did not surrender their dominance of the chicory trade. And after the FTC ruling, Gordon McMaurin left to start his long-delayed career as an architect. They brought in another man, a business person that headed up the chicory company in place of David, that did a wonderful job, and they continued dominating the chicory trade in the United States. Chicory business remained steady into the 1950s, providing income for about 800 farmers in the Thumb and Saginaw Valley. The removal of tariffs led to cheaper imported chicory and helped doom domestic producers. The Moeller workforce had been trimmed to just 7 workers by November of 1967, when the mill ceased operations. The 12th Avenue property, including a brick warehouse, was sold in 1974. It's not quite clear when the Frank operation shut down, although apparently did not survive the 1960s. So you can see Mr. McMaurin's oldest child, David, was very instrumental in the McMaurin business world, making a name for himself in his own right. Well, that was a brief description of McMaurin's oldest child, David. The youngest child's name was Clair McMaurin, and she went on to marry a Canadian by the name of Norman Mckenzie. Mckenzie was a prominent Regina lawyer and a pioneer patron of the art. From 1912 to 1936, he amassed an impressive collection of paintings and drawings of the Italian Renaissance, antiquities of Asia and Middle East, and work by contemporary artists of his day. Mckenzie was the first art collection of note in Saskatchewan. Of course, after they were married, Clair went with her husband to live in Canada. When he died in 1936, he bequeathed his collection along with an endowment to the University of Saskatchewan, Regina College, so that great works of art would be preserved and exhibited for the people of Saskatchewan. The Norman Mckenzie Art Gallery opened in 1953 as a university-run gallery. Before Clair's death in 1958, she joined with her older sister and brother-in-law, Emma and Andrew Murphy, in making several gifts to the people of Port Huron. These included the McMorrin Place, as well as two municipal swimming pools, one in Sanborn Park and the other at Court Street. And probably most people don't realize this or have forgotten that these two pools actually had names other than the ones I just mentioned. The pool at Sanborn Park is called the Andrew Murphy Memorial Pool, and the one on Court Street is the Emma McMorrin Murphy Memorial Pool. And then there was, of course, one of the most important donations that were made for the SC4, St. Clair Community College, and that was the Clair E. Mckenzie Library Science Building, which was opened in 1968. This is the same corner that the St. Stephen's Church used to sit on. And this is a little older picture where the tower had a roof on it. And it was there, probably since the 1800s. Morris Snyder, the retired general manager of McMorrin Place, said this: "At one time the college was condemned. If they had not agreed to erect the Clair Mckenzie building, I don't know what would have happened to the college." After Clair's husband died, she also brought back several paintings from her husband's massive art collection in Canada. And eventually these were donated to the Port Huron Museum. Of course, the Port Huron Museum never displayed them, and then eventually they were damaged from smoke from a fire, and the museum had no money to restore them, so eventually they were sold to another museum. All right, we've looked at two of the children that lived in this home, the oldest David and the youngest Clara. Let's look at the middle child, Emma. Today we don't remember Emma as Emma McMorrin, we remember her as Emma Murphy, the wife of Andrew Murphy. Mr. Murphy came to Port Huron at the turn of the century, around the year 1900, 1901, when the town looked like this. As you can see, there were streetcars, but the streets themselves were dirt. And this didn't look too bad in this picture. But when it rained, it looked more like this. Plank roads were tried earlier around the area. They did much better than, of course, the mud, but they were certainly inefficient as well. The thing that was really coming in vogue in the early 1900s was paving the streets with bricks, and that's where Andrew Murphy comes in. Andrew Murphy was from Ohio, and he came to Port Huron with a contract from the city of Port Huron to pave their muddy streets. And you can see from this engineering news publication that he had a contract that was awarded to him for $14,259, it looks like, for paving certain streets in the city. And we can see from this publication he also paved some streets in Sarnia. This one was for the George Street in Sarnia. And you can see from this he went some distance in order to pave streets. This is from Petersburg, Virginia. Remember this photograph here before the street was paved with bricks. Now look at this photograph here. It's a black and white, but you can tell as we zoom in, this is now a brick street. Mr. Murphy certainly would have became acquainted with Mr. McMorrin through business in the city of Port Huron, because Mr. McMorrin was pretty much into everything. And pretty soon he was spending quite a bit of time, I would think, at the Maclaurin home. Not for business reasons, though. He spent the time there because he was courting Mr. Maclaurin's daughter, Emma. Emma Josephine Maclaurin and Andrew J. Murphy were married in Fort Huron, June 21st, 1905. Murphy helped run his father-in-law's many enterprises, including the Fort Huron, Missouri Ferry Company and the Great Lakes Foundry that we mentioned earlier. They made the flywheels for Chevrolet engines until the Great Depression. I always thought that the Murphys had a home of their own, and perhaps after Mr. Maclaurin died, they moved into that home, his home. But that isn't the case. The 1904 directory, just a year before they were married, it shows Mr. Murphy living at the Harrington Hotel. But the year after, 1906, it shows him living with Henry Maclaurin in his home. And every subsequent directory after that showed them living there as well, so I thought that was kind of interesting. This photograph you're looking at is Andrew Murphy beside his car, and in the background you can see his home. This would be the rear of his home, actually. In 1953, a solid majority of Fort Huron voters approved a proposal to build a civic auditorium at the site where fire had destroyed City Hall 4 years earlier. A majority wasn't good enough. In those days, Michigan communities could take on public debt only if a 60% plurality of voters gave their blessings. The Fort Huron proposal fell just short of that threshold. 2 years later, Maclaurin's daughters, Emma Murphy and Clair Mckenzie, who lived in Western Canada at that time, offered to build the auditorium. They believed Fort Huron deserved a first-class theater, and Emma, as well as Clair, was a great lover of the arts. The photograph you're looking at here is Emma turning a shovel full of dirt at the groundbreaking ceremony. The daughters asked for the Civic Center to be named in memory of Henry Maclaurin, their father, and so the building began. Originally there was no tower planned for this project. Cap Kiefer, who was a prominent businessman in the early 20th century, backed away from a plan to build a lighthouse as a centerpiece of Kiefer Park, located on the riverfront, where the municipal office center is now. When Kiefer changed his mind, Murphy decided he'd build a tower. Andrew Murphy built this tower as a memorial to his wife Emma. I say memorial because Emma didn't live to see the opening of the Maclaurin complex. Neither did Clair, for that matter. Emma's passing was especially sad because Emma died on January 9, 1960, the day the curtain rose for the first time at the theater at Maclaurin. Emma had helped prepare the theater for a gala opening and then went home to rest before the big evening. Her husband found her dead in her favorite rocking chair. This observation wasn't the first observation tower in Fort Huron, but it's the first one since Tom Edison's dad, Samuel, built his observation tower just north of Pine Grove Park, as you can see in this drawing here. One of the focal points of Maclaurin Auditorium sits in front of the building, actually. It's the sunburst clock, and here you see a newspaper photo of it showing the architect on the right and Al Tyson on the left. Al Tyson, of course, was a friend of the Murphys and Maclaurins, and a driving force actually behind this project as well, and another story complete in itself. An amazing man, and left quite a contribution also to Fort Huron. In this photograph here, we can see Andrew Murphy getting ready to have his picture taken in front of the clock. And here he is posing for the camera. Of course, the black and white picture doesn't do anything for this clock. It shows up much better in this photograph here. Once this clock was installed, it was the largest clock in Michigan. And of course there's the statues, two of them out front. Here's one of them. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the one behind this fellow. I think he's doing just a little bit of an imitation. Mr. Murphy passed away June 21st, 1966. And in our next video, we'll see what happened to Deer Lawn, their beautiful home, and we'll go across the street and look at the history of Mercy Hospital a little bit, and if we have time, we'll mosey down Electric Avenue and see what else there is to see.